I've gotten a lot of comments like the two of these on my Terrifier 3 review. Like, did we find out any more about Sienna's dad or Art's backstory? Is he a demon? What is he? And I have a theory, and now that I just watched Terrifier 3 for a second time and caught a lot more the second time around, I'm ready to talk about it. Because I think that Art the Clown is Satan himself and Sienna is the second coming of Christ. Stay with me now because I'm going to give you all the evidence. Art the Clown's first appearance was in the short called The Ninth Circle that Damien Leone came out with in 2008. You'll usually hear people say, and I've even said it myself, Art the Clown's first appearance is in All Hallows Eve, which means like his first debut appearance in a movie. But really, All Hallows Eve is an anthology, and the first segment of that anthology is the Ninth Circle. What is the Ninth Circle according to lore in Dante's Inferno? It is the deepest layer of hell where Satan himself resides. Now, there is an Easter egg in Terrifier 3 at the end of the movie where we see Art get onto the bus and we see a woman reading a book called The Ninth Circle. I do not think that is a coincidence, and I don't think it is simply just a callback to the original. I think that's a hint that that's where Art is from and where he's going back to because he is Satan himself. Art being Santa and this movie taking place at Christmas could just be for fun, but I think it's more than that. I think it is fully intentional because I think it is meant to be a mockery of the Holy Trinity and of the tradition of Christmas, which of course is said to be Jesus Christ's birthday. So I think Art himself is more than a demon. He is actually Satan, but he's able to use his victims to be hosts and to be demons to do his bidding. Hence why we have Vicky in Terrifier 3. So she's kind of used to do Art's dirty work and she's like his minion. And they do explain a bit in Terrifier 3 that like she was once a human, but now he's using her as a host. So this is where Sienna comes in. So of course in Terrifier 3 we have that scene with her and her father. He creates the superhero for her, the one that she was dressed as in Terrifier 2. And he talks about how this character is an angel warrior that is sent to protect the innocent. And when he hands her this drawing, he gets this vision of her in the future being lashed by Art, which we see in the second movie. So in the second movie, we kind of get the idea that Sienna's an angel, and they start to point at that again in this movie, but there are a lot more hints here that are making me believe that she is actually supposed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. First of all, and I think the most obvious one, is the crown of thorns that is placed on her head by Vicky. Second of all, we see how the wounds specifically on her hands magically heal. So of course, Jesus Christ had the stigmata after being nailed to the cross, and when he resurrected 3 days later, those wounds were healed and just left as scars. At the end of the movie, when Art gets on the bus and the woman is reading the Ninth Circle book, there is a version of Silent Night playing, and I'm pretty sure the lyric I heard was Christ the Redeemer is here. I couldn't tell if it said Christ the Redeemer is born. I swear it said here, and I think that represents Sienna. There's also something that I noticed the second time around that Vicky said that really stuck out to me, and it's when she looked at Sienna and she said, "You're strong, I can tell why they chose you." And I think what was meant by that is they, as in the angels and the heavens, chose you to be the Redeemer, to come back as the second coming. When we saw the flashbacks to Terrifier 2 and we saw Sienna being lashed with a whip by Art the Clown, that also stuck out to me as she's Jesus Christ, which would make her father God himself. Now, we didn't learn a whole lot about her father's backstory in this movie, but fun little Easter egg here, his name is Michael and he's played by Jason Patric, aka Michael from The Lost Boys. So I'm pretty sure that's probably why they named him Michael. I hope so at least. And God provided Jesus the weapon that he needed to save the world, aka the sword that he made for her. There's a lot of religious imagery in this movie as well that points to this. Like at one point, Sienna and Jonathan are in a chapel talking about this letter that he wrote to Sienna. I've looked everywhere to try and find a picture of the letter, but I can't because the movie's so new. But it says something along the lines of Sienna is responsible to defeat the demon. The college that Jonathan goes to also is some sort of religious school because specifically in the bathroom scene, there is a symbol of a chalice with the Eucharist. So Catholicism, right? And all of this is coming from my 14 years of Catholic schooling, so I might be a little rusty on some of it. But before he was crucified, Jesus descended into hell. And we've already kind of pointed out in this movie that in Terrifier 4, Sienna is literally going to descend into hell to go save Gabby. At the end, when Sienna comes face to face with Art and Vicky, there is also the body hanging up that's kind of strung like Jesus being crucified. And Vicky also says to her, you are no savior, there is no hope, there is no God. And she says this in an attempt to then try and take over Sienna, which would therefore make her one of Satan's demons. So based on this, predictions for Terrifier 4, yes, Sienna is going to descend into hell. And I think ultimately, and I hate to say it, but I think Sienna is going to die in Terrifier 4 because she, like Jesus, is going to sacrifice herself for the greater good of the world to defeat the demon and to defeat evil. Predictions otherwise, I don't think Jonathan died. I think they were just trying to convince her that he did to kind of like defeat her spirit and make her more susceptible to being possessed. Because at one point they look at Gabby and they say to Sienna, like, she's the only thing that is making you keep on because she's all you have left. So I think they're trying to strip her of anything that she has so she can then be possessed by them. And so that evil can triumph over good. I think we're also going to find out a lot more about Sienna's father. Again, if we look at it as like he's God and Sienna is Jesus, like he knew that he was going to have to sacrifice his daughter for the greater good of the world, which could have contributed to why he went crazy at the end of his life, like they said in Terrifier 2, and ultimately why he died. Okay, so I was about to post this, but I had another thought, so I had to come back and add this first. So I said Sienna's father is God. However, ever since Terrifier 2, I always had the thought that Sienna's father is actually Art the Clown, because he was like drawing images of Art the Clown before he was even a thing. According to biblical lore, Satan was first an angel. So was Sienna's father an angel, specifically Archangel Michael, which would make sense because his name is Michael, but then he was a fallen angel and he became Satan, aka Art. Is that too far-fetched? Listen, I know people usually say that Terrifier has no plot. I even made a comment in my review saying nobody watches Terrifier for the plot. But in reality, I think this is going to be one of those franchises like Saw, where on the surface it seems to be all blood and gore, but when you look at it, the plot is so much more intricate than that. And overall, I think this whole franchise is just about good versus evil. I would love to hear what everybody else thinks, though. Am I insane? Let me know.
When a 14-year-old kills anyone, one of the first questions is, okay, yes, but are they insane? Because any other option doesn't make sense. 14-year-olds aren't inherently evil, are they? I mean, how can they be? They look so young and naive. She must have some debilitating mental condition that makes her legally insane, right? Carly kept this journal where on March 12th, so a week before the incident, she writes, I think I had a psychotic break earlier. The whole ordeal was quite silly. I actually spoke with one of the voices in my head. Then another page in her journal reads, what do I believe? There is no God. Heaven and hell are fake. You don't need family. Sometimes you must jump into the dark to truly see the light. Death is inevitable. Another one reads, do I have schizophrenia? Am I having a psychotic break? And one that reads, I know one of y'all will read this journal. And there in the middle of that page is a pencil stabbed hole where she writes she stabbed it like Tom Riddle, which is Voldemort from Harry Potter, whose most famous line is, there is no good in evil, there is only power and those too weak to seek it. Allegedly, Carly thought one day she was going to be famous for making a nuclear bomb. I don't know. So it's a lot to unpack, and maybe the prosecutors did not want to unpack it. They offered Carly and her legal team a plea deal. Plead guilty for shooting and killing your mom in the face 3 times and for shooting at your stepfather. Plead guilty and we will give you 40 years in prison. She'll be 54 when she comes out. Carly stands before the judge and rejects the plea deal.
All right, Miss Gregg, did you receive that recommendation of 40 years?
Yes, sir.
And it was your choice and your choice alone to reject that recommendation?
Yes, Your Honor.
In the end, Carly was found guilty. She has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of her mother, the attempted murder of her stepfather, and 10 years for tampering with evidence.
This boy killed his entire family on Halloween. This case is insane. You won't want to miss it. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about your crime. Let's get into this case.
A triple homicide in Ottawa County this Halloween. Deputies won't say how the mother, father, and son died, but their suspects already behind bars.
The Liskey family lived in a northern suburb of Toledo, Ohio. They had quite a lot of land near Lake Erie. The name of the lake certainly matches this case. They were a blended household which consisted of William Billy Lisk and his wife Susan and their 3 sons. William Jr., who I'm just going to refer to the son as William, because they have the same name, and the dad is Billy, okay? Just to avoid any sort of confusion. So, the dad, Billy, son, William. William was his son from a previous marriage, and the 2 other boys, Derek and Darren, were Susan's from her previous marriage. This story focuses on Billy's son, William. Now, he was what you'd consider a problem child. William was a really angry kid. He bullied kids in school. He would act up where he could. That noise. This was something that Susan and Billy thought would just like go away with age, but it didn't. His behavior not only remained, but it got significantly worse with age. Now, William was only 15 when Susan and Billy got together. Susan and Billy were so in love and they ended up getting married and decided to move in together with all of the boys. William hated this. He hated Susan. He hated how she came in and changed everything, and he wanted his old life back. And I think this is a pretty normal feeling, like any normal kid might feel like that, but William was not a normal kid. As the tension grew between William and Susan, so did his disobedience. It all went downhill very fast. There was an altercation in 2002 which led William to be charged in juvenile court. They probably hoped that this charge was enough to kind of scare him and to stop misbehaving. But instead, he got angrier and he got more reckless, and the arguments with Susan became explosive. And in 2004, when William was 18, he would get charged yet again, this time with assault for hitting Susan. And only a month later, he bashed her over the head with a mug and stole her car. Susan wanted to press charges again for that incident, but he had to undergo psychological assessment after that, where he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, therefore making him unfit for trial. William was placed in a group home by his father, which was designed for mental health patients. But despite being in that home, it didn't stop William from getting into trouble still with the police. He then returned home, and not long after, he attempted to attack Susan while she was in the shower. Luckily, she was able to get away. This made Billy so angry that he ended up kicking him out. Mind you, he was 18, so he had to fend for himself. He would still take some medication, but he wasn't consistent with it, which is very damaging, because the moment he thought he was getting better, he would just go off of it, because he'd be like, oh, well, I'm fine now. And then he would do drugs and drink, etc. In 2007, a therapist deemed William a danger to himself and others. He was then hospitalized, and his father, Billy, didn't want to give up on him. He didn't want to see his son live in a hospital forever, and so he applied for guardianship. William was then taken out of the hospital and placed in a halfway home, but he would also occasionally go and visit the family Liskey home. Some believed he was getting better at this point, but in fact, he was getting progressively worse. Susan and her two boys were obviously uncomfortable with William ever being in the house, but they put up with it in support of Billy. Now, around the Liskey house, pets started going missing in the neighborhood, and a dog was even found shot, and I think that everyone kind of knew who did it. Billy started taking William away to the family cabin, which was only a few hours away from the house. It was his way of keeping William away from Susan and the boys, giving them a bit of a break, and also keeping him away from the neighborhood pets. He was trying to be a good dad. He was trying to help his son the best he could, and he would go hunting with him and try to get him to talk about how he was feeling. But Billy had no idea what his son was actually capable of until it was too late. Jump to the 31st of October, 2010. Halloween. One of Susan's sons, Devin, who was 16 at the time, had spent the night before at his biological father's house. It was a Sunday, so he needed to go back to the Liskey residence to get his things to get ready for church that day, and so he did exactly that. He returned home at around 9:30 a.m. and went straight upstairs to his room to start getting ready. On his way back downstairs, he ran into William, who was never usually in the house on his own. I don't think he was allowed. William actually made conversation with Devin, which was abnormal. Devin realized that the couch had been made into a bed, so he assumed that William had just stayed the night. But he knew that his parents weren't home, but he didn't think anything of it. He just thought they were getting on with their day. William's demeanor was also very just off-putting based on how he usually was. Usually he was very moody and dismissive, but today he seemed happy almost. He was very upbeat, and he started asking Devin some questions. Where are you going? How are you getting there? When will you be back? Etc. Like I said, Devin did find this a bit weird, but he didn't think into it that much. Finished the conversation and he went off to church. He got home later in the afternoon and still no one was home, but once again, they were probably just out. That's what he thought to himself. And he went up to his room and just played video games for a while. Later in the evening, it was dark at this point, mind you. He goes downstairs and the lights are off, and at this point he's a bit where is everyone? Where's my brother? Where are my parents? He decided to check Susan and Billy's room to see if maybe they were in there, and when he opened the door, he realized they were, but they were still in bed. But eerily, their heads were under the duvet. He called out their names a few times and received no response, which is when he decided to pull the covers back. He was met with a truly horrific scene. One so bad that he thought, this must be a prank just for that split second. But it wasn't. There was just red everywhere. At that point, he ran straight out of the house and rang his aunt, who would then ring the police. The police were then also met with the same horrific scene. Susan, who was only 48, and Billy, who was 53, were shot multiple times in the head. And unfortunately, Susan was also assaulted after. And then they headed into Derek's room, where they found him as well, in the fetal position under his blankets. His cause of death was blunt force trauma, which was discovered to be with a hammer. One of the worst discoveries made in this whole case was that the police put together that when Devin had originally come home at 9:30 in the morning, his family were already dead. When he had that conversation with William had already committed the crime, and he could have been next. And why didn't William do it? It's all these questions, and it's the thought that he sat there playing video games, not knowing that on the other side of his wall were his parents. I can't imagine the effect that had on Devin. I mean, he lost everyone. There was no question on who committed this crime. The police also realized Billy's car was stolen. They found Billy at the family cottage and arrested him. Originally wanted to plead not guilty, but ended up pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was 25 when he killed his entire family. I say entire, I know that Devin still survived, but Devin lost his entire family. He was given 3 life sentences with no possibility of parole, but he ended up unaliving himself in his own prison cell at the age of 29. That's all for this case. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. Wherever he is in the world, I hope that Devin is doing okay despite everything. And let me know what case you guys want to see next. Thank you all for your love and support, and I'll see you in the next video. If you want more videos like this, check out the playlist down below. Bye!
Okay, so this is part 2, but again, they're completely different stories. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go watch the video before this one. I will still be tagging her in the caption if you want to go follow. I think I started hearing things when I was almost 15 and up until I left. Just to put it out there, I've always been afraid of the dark. So at night, my siblings would let me keep the stairs light on and never really bothered them. So when I started to notice that it was being turned off, I would simply turn it back on and no one ever mentioned it. Eventually, I started to hear Tabor Leanne coming from down the stairs, to which only my mother would call me that. But when I went to go look, I would always find that the stairs light was off and the space around me was dark and empty. I would usually reply with, "Yes, Mom." Mom? When I was met with no response, I would turn the light back on and go back to my room. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it, but it got to the point I was hearing it every night and sometimes during the day. One of the times that I heard it during the day, I went to my mom and asked her why she kept calling me. She replied, "I didn't." At that point, I was a little irritated, so I told her what had been going on. The light being shut off and the calling of my name, she thought like anyone would that I was just hearing things. But then a little while later, she had told me she talked to her best friend at the time, and she had told my mom that I was not to respond or go down the stairs and that it was some kind of demon trying to lure me to it. When I moved out and moved into my dad's house, I noticed all of the paranormal entities that once surrounded me were gone. I often find myself thinking about these experiences. Sometimes I will hear my stepmom calling me from downstairs even when she's not home. Sometimes the sound of her voice has woken me up. That is terrifying because it sounds like a mimic maybe. Oh, I hope not. Just some background info. I moved into a small town in Indiana when I was 10, along with my mother, stepdad, and siblings, 1 sister and 3 brothers. The older kids started school, which left my youngest brother alone at home with my mom during the day. One day after school, my mom asked to talk to me about my little brother. I'll call him June. He was around 4 or 5 at the time. She said that he'd been talking about this imaginary friend and that June had said his name is Jeff, he has white hair, he's 10 10 like Tabor, and he died here, mommy, and just smiled at her. He later described what he looked like. He said that he was wearing something like a coal miner's striped outfit and that he was dirty. That's how my mom put it. After maybe a couple of years, he couldn't remember anything about him. Later, when I was around 14 or 15, I had switched rooms with one of my siblings. After a little while, I started to feel someone crawling into bed with me. Not a pet. Whatever it was just as heavy as a person. I could feel the bed getting weighed down by it. I had also just gotten a mirror, and yes, it was stupid. It was placed almost directly in front of the bed. That's where I would see him, but only in the reflection. He would just stand there. Out of everything in that house, I felt as if he was the only one that was good and didn't want to scare or hurt us. I feel like this may have been sleep paralysis, maybe. I feel like I would still have been scared just like by simply seeing him in the reflection of that mirror. What do you guys think?
Did you see what happened with Elon Musk?
Which one?
Yo, they just dropped some...
Oh, the event in LA?
The recent tech fam.
Yeah. I saw this.
They straight up have iRobot robots serving food, bringing you whatever you want, communicating, putting up peace signs, literally communicating like real people. AI, all intelligent fam. And this is where he's so smart.
Why?
My God. Yo, I'm ready to buy like 20 of these, fam, and just let it work.
Oh, the cars, the self-drivings?
The cars. So his plan is to pretty much combine Airbnb and Uber. Put it into one and create cars that you can buy out that will make you money and pretty much be a self-sustaining Uber that drives itself.
So crazy. We missed that event by like a day too.
That was in LA.
Yeah, they I think the whole Warner Brothers Studios was rented out, and that was when the robots were serving people and stuff like that. You saw the video, right?
Yeah.
How it sounded exactly like a human.
That's
do you want white chocolate or dark chocolate, sir? What the fuck?
See, leave down in the comments right now. Also, leave a like. But leave down in the comments right now. Are you guys afraid of what's gonna happen with it? Because I'm looking at it right now as, okay, this is what our reality is. Boom.
Yeah.
We've seen where this takes us in.
So, you think Terrifier is no plot, all gore. If this is you, I urge you to watch this entire video. I'm going to jump into my personal theory of what exactly is going on, which involves a lot of religious imagery. Now, before I jump into it entirely, I do want to give a huge shout out to Sydney from Horror Chronicles and According to Seth from the Dark Screen Society. They both posted videos with similar theories over the weekend, and I wanted to join the conversation. Now let's dive in, but warning, this will contain spoilers for the entire Terrifier franchise, including number 3. But Art the Clown's first appearance was in a short called The Ninth Circle, which according to text, the Ninth Circle is where Satan resides. Now at the end of Terrifier 1, Art the Clown shoots himself in the head so that he doesn't get taken in by the cops. But at the very end, he reanimates and comes back to life. We then learn in the intro of Terrifier 2 that he was resurrected by an entity. This entity then presents itself to Art the Clown as the little pale girl. We'll circle back to this form a bit later as well. Now it's here in the laundromat that the little pale girl and Art the Clown play patty cake, and afterwards Art is all healed, including the wound to his head. Now where am I going with this? In biblical text we have the dragon, aka Satan, and the beast of the sea, aka the Antichrist. The Antichrist is given its authority by Satan. The Antichrist also suffers a fatal head wound, which is miraculously healed. So, fatal head wound, healed by Satan. Now let's talk our final girl, Sienna. Obviously, Sienna is meant to be some sort of angel, the good in Good versus Evil. But her armor is more significant than you might think, because I believe it's meant to be the armor of God. Here is a clear side-by-side. Now here's a breakdown of the armor of God. Belt of truth, breastplate of righteousness, shoes of the gospel of peace, shield of faith, helmet of salvation, sword of the spirit. Now clearly the design of Sienna's outfit does resemble the armor of God, but it also acts like it as well. The most obvious thing is the sword that Sienna gets from her father, but the sword also acts as the shield of faith. It's said to extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. In the Clown Cafe scene, Sienna literally uses the sword to block Art's flames. Speaking of the Clown Cafe scene, Damien Leone has always described this scene as a divine test for Sienna. The Clown Cafe is clearly Art the Clown's little section of hell. And in this sequence, Art the Clown tempts everybody on the playground with treats and gifts. The only one that's able to see Art the Clown for what he really is, pure evil, is Sienna. Which goes back to Sienna using the sword to go against Art. Now, all of this was prophesied by her father, and we know this by his sketchbook. Now, what's also in her father's sketchbook is this news article about a 10-year-old girl. Now, the article says the little girl's body was found in a makeup trailer just outside the grounds of the carnival, which heavily implies that this is one of Art the Clown's early victims. Boy, does she look familiar. That's right, the little pale girl. So Satan not only manifests and presents itself to Art in a clown form, but it took the form of one of his early victims. Now back to Sienna. Obviously at the end of Terrifier 2, she goes through some shit. A very similar journey that Jesus went on before he was crucified. She's not only whipped by Art the Clown, but when he throws her down into the pit before throwing her into hell, he spits on her, which they also did to Jesus before his crucifixion as well, as a way to mock him. Speaking of crucifixion, this is what Sienna essentially goes through in the water tank down in the Clown Cafe. Hell, she even has a stab wound in the side, much like Jesus. And after she dies, a few moments later, the sword lights up, essentially resurrecting her. This is the moment that Sienna officially becomes the chosen one. She comes out of her tomb in hell and uses the sword to decapitate Art the Clown, somewhat fulfilling the prophecy in her father's sketchbook. But we're not done. The little pale girl picks up his head as to say, I'm not done with you yet. Rewind to earlier in the film when she's watching TV and she gets introduced to Victoria, a victim of Art the Clown's in the first Terrifier. Victoria is obviously at a very low point in her life. She even says that she wishes she was dead, which makes a perfect person to possess, which is exactly what happens, shown by the glowing eye at the end of Terrifier 2. The same exact glowing eyes that the little pale girl had throughout the film. Now we get to Terrifier 3. So Victoria is possessed by Satan, who has rebirthed the Antichrist, Art the Clown. And instead of Satan sending the Antichrist to deal with the chosen one himself, they're going to do it as a duo. But first, they've both been through a lot of shit and they need to rest. And it's really this scene in particular that really started to tell me who was actually in control. When they head to the abandoned building to get some rest and Victoria walks up to the mirror, the light fixture above it turns on, which was a visual cue for me to say that this person has energy, which is a very important visual cue in this scene because when she gets in the tub and, well, goes to sleep, the light turns off. And while Vicky's going through this process, Art the Clown is following by simultaneously going upstairs to sit in a chair to rest. Now, I brought up the light because when the construction guys come in 5 years later, that light turns on, suggesting that the slumber is over and they're ready to get back at it. And as soon as Vicky wakes up, Art the Clown does as well. Fast forward a bit, we learn more about Sienna's father, Michael. It's only when Sienna touches the drawing that her father is giving her of her angel character that he gets a vision. All the visions of her getting whipped by Art the Clown, etc. But we also get this scene that Sienna sees. A Mother Mary statue holding a demon by a chain. What's the demon making? An upgraded, real version of the armor of God. Now, it's funny that her father's name would end up being Michael. That's gotta be a reference to Saint Michael, a spiritual warrior in the battle of good versus evil. Which would make sense how he's able to see all these prophecies and help Sienna get ready. Now, we also get this moment between Sienna and Jonathan where Sienna reads this letter that she got from her brother, basically explaining that the little pale girl is a demon, they need to destroy her. But there's a moment here that explains maybe where Art the Clown does come from. And I don't remember the exact wording, but basically this line says that the demon needs a host, somebody that's like down bad, like a serial killer. Which tells me this early stuff that Art the Clown went through, he was an actual human being, a clown at a carnival. And at the end of Terrifier 1, when he puts a bullet in his head, Satan goes, well, I'm going to use you, resurrected. It's at the end of Terrifier 3 that you really see that Victoria, aka Satan, is in control. Art the Clown takes a back seat, which again gives me Satan Antichrist vibes. Obviously, her uncle is in a crucifix form on the wall. Vicky has the crown of thorns, places it on Sienna's head. further implying that Sienna is not only the chosen one, but like a second coming of Christ. And the cliffhanger of the film is that Gabby gets taken down to hell, and we're obviously going to hell in Terrifier 4. Which implies the ultimate ending of this franchise. The beasts are ultimately defeated by Christ, thrown into a lake of fire. And to wrap all of this back to the very beginning, at the end of Terrifier 3, the lady on the bus is reading a book called The Ninth Circle. I hope this clears a bunch of stuff up for you. I know I rambled on for far too long, and you don't have to like it. It can be convoluted. It can be delivered in a way that you don't like. But I just hate hearing that the Terrifier movies have zero plot. Fucking debatable.
Where's the new episode? Well, listen, I'm currently in a hospital. Whose baby is that?
Out. Come on, man. Oh, I'm not fucking playing. Oh my god, what the fuck is that? Oh. There's nobody in this fucking store, dude. It's freaking me out, bro.
Pennywise, are you down there? Are you... The fuck is that?
Hello? Hello?
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
What the fuck?
This is one of the worst torture methods in human history. The Glasgow Smile, also known as the Chelsea Smile, is a particularly brutal and disfiguring form of assault. It involves cutting from the corners of a person's mouth up towards the ears. This violent practice is thought to have emerged in Glasgow, Scotland during the 1920s and 1930s, and the term Glasgow Smile is believed to have originated from this city. While the act might have historical precedence, it became notoriously associated with Glasgow during this time. The method typically involves using a sharp implement, such as a utility knife or a shard of broken glass, to make the incisions from the mouth corners to the ears. The resulting injury leaves a scar that grotesquely resembles a broad, unnatural smile. The physical pain inflicted is immense, and the psychological impact on the victim is profound and lasting. A notable individual who has endured such an attack is actor Tommy Flanagan, who bears the scars of a Glasgow smile from an incident outside a bar in Glasgow.
Terrifier 3 is out. I saw it yesterday. Is it as gory as everyone is saying it is? Art was truly messing people up. There are definitely some controversial moments, especially later on in the movie, that I think will upset some people. Art the Clown himself, David Howard Thornton, even posted that his cousin's theater has like protesters outside saying that it's satanic. To me personally, this kind of felt like the bedroom scene in Terrifier 2, but more scattered throughout the entire movie. There was no one specific scene that I was like, oh yes, this is the crazy one that everybody's talking about. There is something so cool about getting to watch a horror franchise be born right in front of your eyes. If you've seen Terrifier 2, I do mean that literally, with Art's severed head. But seriously, Art the Clown is the new Freddy. He's the new Jason. He's the new Michael Myers. And it is super cool to see how much success that he's getting. And Sienna is like the best final girl of all time. She's really tied up there for me with Laurie Strode. But I saw it with a bunch of super fans. Everybody laughed, cheered, and screamed and groaned all at the perfect times. It was wonderful.
I'm still torn though if this movie beats Terrifier 2 for me. Terrifier 2 I really liked because of all of the lore and story they added. And Terrifier 3 definitely does add a little bit more lore to Art the Clown, which I did enjoy, but I would have liked a little bit more. So at least for right now, for me, it's tied with 2.
Okay, I just sent you guys a video. It's an apparent electrostatic discharge of the moon. Do you think that's real?
I don't think it's real.
This says the moon's surface can become charged due to a number of factors, including solar wind, solar storms. The moon's surface can become highly charged in some areas, which could pose a risk to astronauts. For example, if the moon's surface becomes charged to thousands of volts, it could cause electrical sparks that burn out electronic equipment.
So it's just a ball of electricity, potentially? What if why don't we put solar panels on the moon?
You know what? Yeah.
Wouldn't that like energize like crazy?
Well, then how would we get the power back?
Carry it? Carry it, put it in a bucket or something? I don't know.
Get a really long extension cord.